coming down the mountain in the afterglow of an extraordinary moment of God's transformative presence, Jesus turns and sets his face toward Jerusalem, toward the passion, toward the cross, toward the tomb, toward the promised new life. And this turning begins the 40-day wilderness journey leading to the promised new life. Jesus is preparing his disciples to embrace and live as God's people. And this turning is also our Lenten journey as we walk with Jesus and his disciples into this wilderness journey. And so I say to all of you, welcome to the wilderness. Welcome to the wilderness journey that God invites us to undertake in the same way that God has invited countless people throughout time and place to take comparable wilderness treks. Whether it is Noah's 40 days and nights of rain and flood, the 40 years of the wilderness wandering of the Hebrews, Jesus' own 40 days of temptation in the wilderness. Because like all of these journeys, God will lead us away from all the deathly situations of risk and all the daily distractions and take us out into a wilderness where God will shape and mold us into being the people who are prepared to live as a community of neighborly love, mutuality, and sustainability in a relationship of absolute trust of God, who we are assured will enter into situations of risk and vulnerability in order to be in transformative solidarity with God's at-risk people, as Walter Brueggemann has described as God-gathered people, among whom we are numbered. And that's the point of the wilderness track. For it is in the wilderness, you see, where we are free of the distractions tempting us to give up trusting God, so we might give our loyalty to other things or other people who we think might give better provisions for sustaining our life than does God, or be tempting us to abandon God altogether and go back and resubmit to an old way of being, even one that leads to death. And this wilderness trek will not be easy as we go through the wilderness. Since if we take it seriously and fully engage the journey, we will be challenged more than we have been challenged before in our lives. Because you see, while the wilderness is a place of positive, transformative experiences leading to a new and more sustainable life, it does not come easy. Because the wilderness is the place where we are challenged to let go of our myth of self-creation and self-sufficiency and realize our dependence upon God for life and all we need for life. We are challenged to place our lives in God's hands in the certainty of trust that encompasses more than the usual falling backwards and trusting our companions will catch us before we fall to the ground. Because God teaches us how to live together as a community made up of a wide, diverse group of people who do not focus on differences, who do not erect barriers to separate ourselves from others, who do not demonize other people, but who instead live as one people in a way of being community that is radically different from all the other ways of living that all the other teachers of community living tell us are the one true way to live as a one true way of life. Because what we will discover in the wilderness is that all of these other teachers, all their philosophies, all their self-help books inevitably fall short and prove incapable of sustaining the community and capable of sustaining life. And not only that, but God will also lay out before us this way of living together without coercing us to live that way. Instead, God will give us the power to choose to live this way. And will walk with us in our choices, even when we make choices that takes us down a path leading away from God and God's kingdom. And yet God will stay with us as we struggle to stay on this path leading to life. And God will call us back to that path. That path that leads us to the best life that we can imagine every time we take the wrong turn. Until at last we finally trust God enough to make the commitment to live God's way of life. Not by our words, not by our ascetic and self-denial disciplines of whatever we might think about giving up, and particularly those disciplines that might be telling us that we are, as God's creation in the flesh, maybe not so good. Rather, we will make that commitment by the way we live together as God's beloved community, by being compassionate as Christ is compassionate, by being humble as Christ is humble, by being gentle and patient and kind as Christ is, and by wrapping all of this in a love that seeks the best for each other, just as Christ did and just as Christ does, because in this rests shalom. In this rests our peace that is beyond all comprehension, but is not beyond our attainment. And this is our Lenten wilderness struggle. Just as it was the struggle of the Hebrews in their wilderness trek from Egypt to the Promised Land, when they had to trust that God was going to give them manna and quail every single day. Give them water when they were thirsty. Protect them when their lives were being threatened for destruction. As it was the same struggle for Noah and his family, not only in building an ark, as they were then ridiculed by their other members of their community, and not only in the gathering of the animals and all of those creatures, but also staying on the ark throughout the devastating flood, the endless days of nights of floating and waiting for the waters to recede. It's the same struggle of Hagar and her child in their wilderness trek, and it's the same struggle of Jesus in the wilderness temptation. It is the same struggle of the disciples in their wilderness trek to Jerusalem and to Easter morning. It is the same struggle of the house churches of Colossae that Paul is instructing with his letter, because they live in the wilderness of a cosmopolitan city located in what is now the modern nation of Turkey, where so many competing religions and philosophies, including the composite spirituality of Hellenistic religious philosophy, mysticism, and asceticism, all swirled around them in what we might describe today as a New Age stew. It is the same struggle every Christian community throughout time and place. It is the same struggle that every Christian community continues, no matter where they are in the world today. And as we walk through this wilderness, this Lenten journey, we will stop each Sabbath to celebrate the 6 feasts that God called the Hebrews to celebrate while they were still in the wilderness. Those wonderful wilderness feasts of Leviticus 23, which we were given a little taste of, and which are the feast of Passover, the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of first fruits, the feast of Pentecost, the feast of trumpets, the feast of booths or tents. And each one of these feasts will call us to celebrate God with praise and thanksgiving, and yet they will also call us to remember why we celebrate, why we give thanks, why we are being shaped and molded for life, and for all of you, how this Lenten time, this Lenten wilderness journey is preparing you all for the new future God is designing for you as you welcome a new pastor who comes to partner with you in ministry, who comes to partner with you in living into God's future for you. And I just pray that God might bless this wilderness journey and that we all may grow in compassionate peace together.